My name is Alexander Hagans. I'm a full-time MBA student here at Smith. I'm happy to welcome you all to University of Maryland's Smith School of Business Virtual Auditorium. We are fortunate to house over 300 attendees this evening. Tonight, we are proud to welcome back Smith alumni that have pursued careers in the tech industry, but more importantly, are leaders that have made it a point to give back to their community. In these uncertain times, it is more important than ever that we strive to look out for one another personally and professionally. In the Black community, especially, it is imperative that we share knowledge and experiences with each other in order to gain the representation at all levels of the workforce. Tonight's discussion is just that, sharing knowledge and experiences. Now, to introduce our moderator, who will introduce our panelists for tonight, Jeanette Jordan. Jeanette is the Chief Marketing and Communications Officer at the Kapoor Center, a social impact organization whose mission is to make the technology ecosystem and the entrepreneurship more diverse and inclusive. Jeanette has over a decade of experience working in the technology industry, where she has held marketing leadership positions at Nextworld, Factual, Neustar, Verizon, Millennial Media, and PayPal. Jeanette has also serves as a career coach for the Grand Quest, a professional development program that helps people navigate career transitions, and she is the co-host of a new business podcast called Market Ready, which helps people break into product marketing. Jeanette has received an MBA from Smith and earned a dual bachelor's degree from Spelman College and Columbia University in Science and Civil Engineering. Without further ado, Jeanette Jordan.
Thank you so much, Alex, for the warm welcome. I am so happy to be here with you all this evening. As Alex mentioned, we are living in unprecedented times, given by the fact that we're gathering on Zoom instead of in Van Munching Hall. I want everybody to remember great challenges also yields great opportunities. And I'm so excited to moderate this conversation with my esteemed alum, talking about what they and their companies are doing to help solve some of our greatest issues, which is racial, social inequity. So without further ado, I will have the panelists introduce themselves, and I will start with Sharika.
Thank you, Jeanette, and thank you, OCS and the Smith alumni community for inviting us and having us here on the panel today. My name is Sharika Ekpo, and I'm a proud graduate of the full-time MBA program, class of 2009. Whoop, whoop. I am really excited to share a little bit more about my journey. Jeanette, are we going through full introductions now, or?
Yep. Full introduction.
Okay. Sounds good. I am a native Washingtonian, and I currently reside in the Bay. I graduated from the program in 2009 and thought I would use my financial background and financial industry knowledge to move into consulting, because a lot of full-time MBA students want to move into consulting. Did an internship and realized that that was not the route that I wanted to go. So I quickly pivoted into people operations, which is something that has always been near and dear to my heart, better known as HR, and served in a number of leadership positions in the federal government from 2009 to 2019. In 2019, I took a huge risk, packed my family, I know that that was the right thing to do now, after being in this role almost a year and a half, because of the impact that I've been able to have in such a short time. But the one thing I want to, relate to this group here today is, don't be afraid to take risks. Explore all opportunities, especially while you're in this safe environment in school, and definitely lean on your network. The Smith School has a fantastic network of faculty, staff, and alum, and I am one of those alum who are happy to help you along the way. Thanks.
Thanks, Sharika. Jimin, why don't you introduce yourself?
Sure thing. So hey everyone, Jimin Gaulman, proud Smith alum of class 2015 full-time MBA program. I am from Baltimore, Maryland, grew up in the Baltimore area all of my life. Went to Bowie State University, which is right down the street from University of Maryland for undergrad, a mathematician from my time at Bowie State University. At Smith, I actually was originally focused on strategy and finance, and it wasn't until I took a Dr. Nita Moy's class where HR kind of was introduced to me, and I got the passion to go on and pursue a career in HR. After Smith, I went on to go to GE, General Electric Aviation Business. Spent a few years at GE. My most recent role was a senior HR leader. And then about a year and a half ago, almost 2 years ago, I got a call from SpaceX asking if I would be interested in a head of diversity inclusion role that they had open at the company. The first of its kind, really. And so I went through the interview and joined SpaceX about a year and a half ago. And since then, I've been kind of in the trenches, just working on diversity inclusion at SpaceX. I would say in my spare time, I really enjoy the outdoors, staying active. I live in LA, so in a very interesting time of our country and of the world with the pandemic, having access to the beach has been awesome. So I look forward to this conversation.
Thank you, Jimin. Akiva, why don't you bring us home?
Great, thank you, Jeanette. Thank you so much for including me in this panel. It's really an honor to be amongst such esteemed colleagues. So hi everyone, I'm Akiva Lewis. I am a graduate of the full-time program in '05. So I guess that makes me one of the senior members here. I had hair back when I was at the program. So my career trajectory has been that when I left the program, when I graduated with the MBA, I had 2 job offers. My stated purpose of getting an MBA program, of getting the MBA, was to actually get into the diversity space. So I did an internship throughout my time with a diversity consultant in Virginia. And when I graduated, I had a job offer for diversity with HP. And then I also had a job offer with Intel as an HR specialist. And after I went and met with the companies and kind of got a better sense around what the role was, I ended up choosing the Intel one, which was not an easy thing to do, given that the diversity job with HP was that was my stated purpose, but purely based on the culture of Intel and my confidence in their growth and the collaboration that I saw on the team, I chose that path. I ended up spending 5 years at Intel. Was really happy there. After 3 years of kind of growing the ranks as an HR business partner, I moved over into compensation because I wanted to become an expert in something, and I was more inclined towards data and analytics, and so comp was a good home for that. And then about 2 years later, or a year and a half later, Google called. And when Google calls, you answer. And I was very fortunate enough to be able to join Google on their compensation team as they were looking to grow and bring in people with industry experience. So I ended up spending close to 10 years at Google. During that time, I was on comp for a couple of years. Then I left HR actually and went to strategy and sales strategy and operations. And spent 6 years in that organization. But about 4 years in, I ended up kind of having a bit of a crisis of conscience, or maybe it was a midlife crisis, I'm not quite sure, where I was like, I'm not getting a sense of meaning from my job. Where's my purpose? And that kind of brought me back to the diversity space. And because I had been able to kind of build on my credibility within the sales organization, I actually created a brand new role at Google to do outreach to women, Black, and Latinx business owners in the US and try to educate them around digital marketing and eventually try to get them in as customers. And so it was a lot of fun to be able to build something from scratch and to have the Google name behind me to do it and some of those Google resources. And so that kind of propelled me into this next phase of my career. After a couple of years of doing that work, I moved over into the central diversity team at Google, where I was focused on equity across kind of key HR processes. So thinking like talent development and benefits, succession planning, so on and so forth. And then I moved over into the talent acquisition space to lead up diversity for our sourcing organization. So how do we do more outreach to underrepresented engineers to try to bring them into Google? Then about 6 months ago, actually, I decided to leave Google and I joined Workday. You can see I'm branded here for Workday. And at Workday, I'm a diversity business partner, and Workday is much smaller than Google. And so I've actually been able to kind of create this function within the organization and have a little bit more of an entrepreneurial bent in terms of thinking about diversity and inclusion. So I've been there since March and really happy to be here and to share more as the conversation progresses.
Thank you so much. So let's get into the meat of the discussion. I would like to know why DEI in tech matters, in particular at this moment in history. And Jimin, why don't you kick us off?
Yeah, I would say if you look at a ton of studies across a variety of industries, it's pretty clear that diverse teams outperform homogeneous teams. And I think if you just start there by, hey, any company, any tech company wants the best workforce to do the best, to have the best output, to make that company the best company, whatever sector it's in. And so purely based off of data and decades of research, right? Diverse teams outperform homogeneous teams. I would say that's number one. I would say a second piece of this is, and I'll put this in the top two because I never wanted to get lost. It's just the right thing to do, right? Having and making sure that every company is accessible to anyone from any background with that identifies as any specific demographic group. It's just the right thing to do, right? From a humanity perspective. And we can dig into that as this conversation goes on. Number three, I would say you want if you look at the finances for most companies, right? Compensation typically is the biggest line item on their balance sheet, right? Depending on the company, it could be anywhere from half of the cost or even up to like 3/4. And if you think of you're spending that much money for human capital, why not make sure that they're coming to work feeling the best that they can feel, but also they're in an environment where they can produce their best work, right? So that's getting into the inclusion side of why DEI is important for a company. I'll stop there. I'll let my fellow panelists kind of add some comments, but those are the three things that come to mind for me.
Sharika, what would you add to that?
Thank you, Jimin, for that, because you are absolutely correct. Couple of things that I would add. The first is really around the need to shake things up, right? The time of having the good old boys club has come and gone. And I think the tech industry is an industry that is experiencing exponential growth and has for the last, decade or so. And so as we continue to shine as industry leaders and sector leaders, we have to set the example. Diverse teams not only outproduce, but also provide opportunities for inclusion for our users. So when we think about all of the data sets and the algorithms and the products that we create, having diverse teams to create those products and outputs are key to ensuring that we actually capture the market share in a way that's the most advantageous and gives us the largest competitive advantage. The other thing I would say is really around belonging. So Jimin touched on inclusion. This sense of comfortability in the workplace and being able to actually perform at your highest potential is key. So when you think about being the only person that looks like you or talks like you or is from the same area in your workplace, that creates a sense of isolation. And that sense of isolation can cause you to shrink inward. And so when I think about talking to my leaders about diversity and more importantly, inclusion, I really think about creating a space where everyone belongs. And that is why I think it is really important for us to lead the way as the tech industry.
Thanks, Sharika. And I love what you added on the product side. As someone who's been a decade in product marketing, I think, especially now, it's important to remember as we are going to hit an innovation moment and new products are going to be developed. And if we do not have diverse teams developing that, a whole segment of the population will get left out as we think about AI, as we think about VR, as we think about voice technology, as we think about being contactless in the future. Akiva, what would you add to that?
Yeah, I could not agree more with everything that was said. I would just maybe put an exclamation point on, this notion that, the demographics of the world are shifting, and technology is getting more pervasive in everything that we do. And so, if you look at it from the company's perspective, like their market is looking different than it did 20 years ago. And the way it looks now is going to be very different. 20 years from now, it's going to look very different from now. So you have to be thinking about those differences and how do you design for everybody in order to expand one's place. But also because technology is becoming so integrated in everything that we do, there's a special responsibility for tech companies to make sure that we're operating in a way that's going to increase opportunity for everybody, as opposed to just help the fortunes of a select few, or for those that have been traditionally in the majority populations. And so there's a responsibility to society from these companies, from companies that I'm a part of, in order to help break down those barriers and make sure that opportunity is available to all.
Yeah, I think that is a great point, especially now that so many of us, at least in the technology industry, are working from home, kids are learning from home. The spotlight on the digital divide is bigger than ever. And if we don't actually have an even distribution of resources, kids are going to be left behind in education at this moment. And so I think that is a really good point. I want to move into, what are your companies doing as far as DEI initiatives? And can you tell us something that might be unique that we can't just read about? Like, what are you guys, personally excited about that's happening within your organizations on a DEI front? Akiva,
Want me to kick us off? Sure.
Yeah.
All right. Okay, so I'm at Workday, and for those of you that don't know, we're not as kind of big name as Google or even SpaceX. So we provide enterprise software, mostly in the HR, the human capital space, and in finance, and then a few other areas too. We're not that big of a company. We're about 12,000 employees. I think we're 3 billion plus in terms of revenue, and from a customer standpoint, we have about 3,000 customers of our HR platform. And so I think one of the things that's really interesting is, because we are a provider of software that drive a lot of the HR engines in these companies, Workday has this huge opportunity to help put diversity and belonging kind of forefront and make it accessible for everybody. As someone who's been in this space for a while, data is a huge barrier for us to be able to make progress. We could spend an hour just talking about the challenges around data. But one of the things that I'm really excited about at Workday is to be able to provide data to the industry to help them in this space. Thinking specifically about what are we doing internally. One is our strategy, we call it VIBE, V-I-B-E, and that stands for Value, Inclusion, Belonging, and Equity for All. And it's really catchy, and you're starting to see it a little more branded out there, which is really nice to see. But the idea really is that we need to take kind of a full view across our employee base around how we want to support everybody to reach their potential. And so we're focused on representation. Just in the last couple of weeks, we've made some bold statements that are now public around growing the number of Black and Latinx employees by 30% over 3 years, and doubling the number of Black and Latinx leaders over 3 years. And so how we think about representation is that's a really critical part. How do we make sure we have the right mix of people? But then it also gets into inclusion, belonging, and equity. And this is, how do we create a culture where everybody feels like this is a place that they can be successful, they can grow their careers, and they can realize their professional dreams within the organization. And so we have a number of different initiatives. Certainly since the murder of George Floyd, there's been extra focus on what we're trying to do. At Workday, there's more dedicated resources. We've accelerated our product roadmap to be able to release more information to customers and publicly. And I'm really excited to see these come to fruition and to help be an engine for that. When it comes to something surprising, I struggled a little bit with this question, but I'd say one thing that's surprising is we're a small team doing all of this. So we're just 10 people who do diversity and belonging work within Workday, where it's our full-time job. We have a ton of people that are supportive and pitching in and lending their capital to help us. But we're a small team and we're a mighty team and we're rising to the moment. And so it's really exciting to be a part of this effort right now.
I love that. In particular, vibe, because the one thing you don't hear is the D in diversity and really moving past that it's just about diversifying the numbers, even though that's important, but really all of the things that happen after you diversify. Also, our organization has a mission of focusing on Black and Latinx folks. So if we can ever be of help, please don't hesitate to reach out. We're your neighbors. How about Sharika? What are you excited about that Google is working on right now?
Google is working on a number of initiatives, but there are a couple of things that I want to point out. So on August 22nd, which was Black Women's Equal Pay Day, the leanin.org and the McKinsey Company, it published a report called the 2020 State of Black Women in Corporate America. And that report just detailed some of the barriers that Black women face at work with leaders and the lack of support, so on and so forth. And what I thought was really interesting is that also came at a time where all of the social unrest is happening and all of the angst is being felt by everyone at Google. But one of the things that we did as a diversity, equity, and inclusion team was to really stop and take stock of all of the great work that we continue to do day in and day out. So one of the things that I'm really, really excited about is one of our inclusion and community building events called the State of Black Women. And it's really a 2-day programming effort, and Akiva knows and has probably heard about this, but it's an opportunity for us to have professional conversations, do some community building, some networking, and really getting all of the Black women at Google together in one place. And that sounds small, but it's actually a really big thing. We are a global company with over 130,000 employees. So it's really good that our leaders found it necessary to stop work and productivity to actually build this community. And in that community, we hear from all of the most senior leaders at Google, but we really talk about issues that impact our progression in the organization, our retention in the organization. And we also talk about some of those key reasons why Black women are having the worst experience out of any other group in corporate America. And that trend is not unique. Let me say this, Google also shares in that trend. And so we consistently look at ways that we can improve that. Black women really talk about the microaggressions that they experience in the workplace, the lack of managerial support. But when I think about all of the things that Google is putting in place, like the State of Black Women Summit, and another intervention is really around our progression and retention specialists. We have a dedicated group of HR professionals whose full-time job it is to reach out to Black plus, Latinx plus, and Native American plus Googlers to ensure that they have the proper support in order to not only break into the industry, but thrive at Google. And I really appreciate that, which is something, and that's something that you just won't know. Because that position around equity and progression is not something that you see echoed across the industry, but it's something unique to Google, and I'm really proud of that. The other thing I wanted to highlight are really some of the commitments that our CEO made. On June 17th, Sundar said, listen, we are committing to concrete actions that will help build the Black Plus community at Google. And one of the things he committed to was really increasing leadership representation by 30% by 2025. That's huge. So what that did was put the onus back on me and my senior leaders to figure out how we do that. There is no, there's no secret in knowing that our representation numbers have we've had incremental success, but we have a long way to go. So we are really focusing on the pathways into tech, the pathways into Google. And then once people get there, what can we do to keep them, right? It's no longer enough to say we get all the cool perks and all of that. That's like short-lived. I love the perks, don't get me wrong, but that's really short-lived. It's really about the work that we're doing and the impact that we're having on the community. So really excited about that. Jimin, I see you cracking up over there.
Yeah, thanks for sharing. I think one thing that I also want to highlight for State of Black Women is economic impact. I had the opportunity to go to a preview night before it was Googlers only, and they showcase Black women-owned businesses from all over. And it was just a beautiful thing to not only use kind of the collective community and power influence, but to translate that to real dollars for Black businesses. So I think that that is amazing. And again, at Caper Center, we are 86% Black leadership. So if we can ever partner with you guys on how we got there, I'm always happy to talk about the innovative solutions that we are incubating. All right, Jimin, tell us what you're excited about. I think SpaceX has so much innovation overall. So I'm really excited to hear what you're doing in DEI space.
Yeah, I'm going to start this my response by Jeanette. You alluded to the tech divide that we're seeing across the country in the current environment. And so one thing that SpaceX is doing more from a technology perspective is with our new sub business, if you will, called Starlink. So it is the effort to put up thousands of satellites across the atmosphere of the world, of the Earth, to provide broadband to places that don't have it or don't have accessible, cheap, but still reliable broadband. And so just thinking through what that means from a humanity perspective, being able to provide, Wi-Fi to communities, not only in America that may not have accessibility to cheap and reliable broadband, but also communities in Africa and communities in Latin America and communities across the world. And so, that's something that we're trying to, engineer from a technology perspective as a company. And, we're constantly launching, hundreds of satellites feels like every few weeks now. So I just wanted to put that plug. On the D&I side, I would say there's two things that I want to highlight. One, when you look at, SpaceX and some of the other high-tech companies, right? A lot of engineers that we hire from various schools across the country, or if you look at, for example, female engineers that graduate, engineers that graduate that happen to identify as female, right? The average is like approximately 20% over the last 5 to 6 years. But if you drill down into that, it's approximately 14% actually major in aerospace, electrical, mechanical engineer. And that's typically the type of engineering that we recruit from. Well, that's not enough, right? 14% is nowhere near enough to really have a diverse workforce wherever you are. And that's just, that's the pool, right? That we're still competing against the Googles of the world or, the Lockheed Martins of the world to get that talent. So the point I'm making is one thing that we've tried to have a really robust focus on is K-12 education, really trying to do what we can to inspire young girls, young Black boys and girls to get the STEM itch, if you will, right? And that doesn't happen by happenstance, right? It's very intentional acts that either happens in people's personal life, how they're nurtured, or maybe even in school. And there's a big disparity for, what some demographics of individuals, the exposure they get versus others, specifically as relates to underrepresented minorities. And so SpaceX, we try to really position ourselves in our local communities in a way where we can bring the cool factor of space into education and partner with schools. An example that I want to highlight is there's a local school here in Hawthorne, California. Hawthorne is 90-something% Latino and Black when you look at the demographics. There's a program in the elementary school that's up the street called Girls in Engineering. These are 3rd, 4th, 5th graders. And every Wednesday, we have a group of engineers that go and work with them on hands-on projects, right? That isn't the most sexy thing, but the impact that has on those girls, 2, 3, 4, 5 years down the road is meaningful. And we've already, as we track kind of the progression of the individuals who participate in that program, we see a big focus or energy around them wanting to pursue engineering or STEM. So that's more from a kind of community outreach. I would say internally, one thing that we just kicked off that is, and Sharika, I think you was alluding to the effort that you're doing around Black female employees at Google, and how just taking that much time off away from work and really focusing on something as critical as diversity and inclusion. Similarly, we just rolled out unconscious bias training for all employees. And this isn't like an online, on-demand kind of click through while you're half asleep type of training, right? This is live, in person. Now we have to do it virtual, but live training where every employee at the company will have to stop and for 90 minutes go through unconscious bias training. If you kind of start doing the math for an 8,000 person organization and how much that costs, I mean, that's a big move to say, look, this is that important for us that we want to make sure everyone understand the impact, the consequences, but also the strategies that each of us can take to do unconscious bias training. I'm not too familiar of too many organizations that have done something like that where it's been in person. But for us, it's not us reinventing the wheel, but really just kind of being bold in the steps we're taking. And so that's something that I know I'm pretty proud of for our leadership to sign up and say, yep, let's do this. And there's a part 2 to this that we're going to roll out probably next year, which is more ongoing workshops. And so sure, you train someone on what bias is and the impact of bias, but how do you then ensure that it's top of mind and they understand how to implement strategies that can mitigate bias at certain points in the employee life cycle. So things like bias-free interview panels or bias-free interview process, promotions, how do you choose who's promoted versus others and how bias can introduce itself into that process. And there's a long list of things that we plan to do from a workshop perspective.
Thank you so much for sharing. I love the comprehensive approach. Not only dealing with your employees, but thinking about the upcoming pipeline. And we also have a STEM education program called SMASH, where we do the same thing. We try to take on different levels of the LEAP tech pipeline, starting with K through 12 education, having tech workforce initiatives that really deals with people who are actively in the tech industry trying to get in or trying to get promoted, as well as entrepreneurship and making sure that we are investing in funding underrepresented founders. And we are going to open up for questions soon, but before we do that, I would just be remiss if I didn't weigh in for this question. My organization actually kicked off about a month ago 100 Days of Action for Racial Justice campaign. And I couldn't be more excited. We are a social and racial justice organization at our core. We sit at the intersection of technology and education and entrepreneurship. But even as a racial justice organization, to really start to drill down in how we could be doing more and making more commitments. So we made a commitment every weekday between August 17th and the end of the year, which was 100 days, to prompt everyone in our community with an action, whether it's small or whether it's big, about what we all can be doing more for this moment. And this week is National Voter Registration Week. And so we are making some big announcements, including today, we're actually opening one of our facilities and we have it registered as a polling station to try to drive civic engagement. So whether it's big or small, I want to encourage everyone in this moment, especially as we think about the tech community or those aspiring to the tech community, use the resources that you have, use the innovation that's available to you, no matter how small or how big, giving students in need a hotspot, putting satellites in the sky, whatever it is, big or small. I think it's important that we all kind of pull together and get involved. All right, so Q&A is open, but I am gonna start off with a couple of questions that we have already received. So what are some tips or best practices when initiating a conversation with your employer about the lack of DEI in the workplace? place. Who's the brave soul who wants to take this on?
Hi.
Mm-hmm.
Hi, thank you all for being here. We really appreciate it. I have a question for all of you. So I wanted to know if you could share with us an experience in your career or your current role where your own diversity has directly led to a solution of a business problem or made just your group dynamic a lot better.
Hey, I'll take that question. Jeanette, I'll take your question too. I'll try to tag team both of them.
Okay. So
to the question that was just asked by the attendee, I would say, you know, I identify as a Black man, and for me, I definitely hit a crossroad back in May with the George Floyd murder, personally, and so just, you know, the week, just to kind of give you the context, that weekend after George Floyd was murdered, we had our Demo 2 launch as a company. And so the first time we launched astronauts, Bob and Doug, to space. It was a pretty big deal from a news cycle perspective, and definitely a big deal internally. So here I am, you know, head of D&I, dealing with this tragic incident that happened in our community, but yet trying to juxtapose that with this exciting time for the company. And I struggled with it, quite honestly. You know, it took me a while just to get my legs under me to really kind of comprehensively understand what we should do as a company. And it wasn't until I think we launched Bob and Doug on a Saturday, I was in the office, stayed maybe 7 hours after that launch. My manager, the team director of HR who I report to was here, and we chatted for about an hour. And for me, I was pretty honest. I was pretty direct, pretty emotional in that conversation. And so that's, from a personal perspective, how I identified really helped kind of guide the work that I was doing in the D&I space. It really allowed me to be more honest than I think I would have been if it wasn't a Black man who was murdered, quite honestly. So this day, I still look back at that moment and say it's probably one of the toughest periods I've ever had in my personal career, just navigating diversity inclusion, or even just in HR. So I'm not sure if Sharika or Akiva has a more eloquent response, but I know for me that was definitely a struggle, and I think it helped motivated me.
Yeah, I'm happy to give a quick story. And Jimin, thank you for sharing that. I think it's really important that you open up and share that experience with everyone. So for me, I'm going to kind of harken back to the point in my career where I was feeling a little bit unsettled. This was when I was at Google and I was looking for more meaning. You know, once I kind of landed on coming back to diversity and inclusion, and by the way, I'm white, I'm cisgender male, I'm Jewish, and so one of the things that really kind of stood out to me was once I kind of latched onto this idea that we need to do more outreach to women, Black and Latinx business owners, I had an in with the head of the sales team to pitch this idea. And what the background is that there was another team as part of the central diversity team that had been trying to kind of break in and pitch this idea, a similar idea, to get the sales team to invest in that education program, but they could never get it done. But me, coming in, white guy, having been in the organization and built up the relationship with this leader, I was able to kind of move us to yes, and to be able to get agreement that yes, this should be funded, and yes, we should be moving forward with this. And so, you know, I was able to use my position as an ally, use the privilege that I had, you know, across multiple dimensions, to be able to advance. And I think that that's an important component of this, which is, you know, diversity, equity, inclusion. This isn't the job of the people that are underrepresented, or the people that are kind of fighting for for equity and fighting for their voice to be heard. This is the job of everybody, but especially of those that kind of are in positions of power and are able to drive the influence. So, you know, that's when I've been able to use my my identity to help advance this work. And I would just call on, you know, everybody else out there who does have privilege and the privilege to be in a position of influence, to use that to advance this work. We're all in this together, and it can't be left on the shoulders of a subset of folks to carry this work forward.
Thank you so much, Akiva. It's such a good point, especially for your colleagues that might need a break in that moment, because we do have to contend with what's happening for us personally, as well as what's happening for us professionally. All right, we have another question. Abby has joined us. Do you want to ask your question?
Yes, hi panelists. Thank you so much for being here today. So my name is Abby Shitabe, and I'm a high school math teacher, but also a second year part-time MBA student at the Shady Grove campus. And diversity and inclusion is something that's extremely important to me. So I wanted to ask a question specifically about inclusion. So when it comes to inclusion, how do Google, SpaceX, and/or Workday foster a climate where people can come from different backgrounds and know that the organization values their ideas?
I'll take that. So thanks for the question, Abby. We, of course, Google is filled with a lot of data. So we have an annual employee engagement survey where we try to take stock of how people are actually feeling and how they are experiencing the organization, because that gives us an idea of what programs and interventions we may need to introduce in order to shift their gap, any gaps that we may see in how the majority is experiencing Google versus the minority. So what I will tell you is we have a number of culture clubs. We have over 30 ERGs. So if there isn't an employee resource group, that's what ERG stands for. I forget not to use the lingo all the time, but if there are over 30 employee resource groups in which you can participate. But the part that I love the most is if there isn't one that you identify with, then you can create it. That level of innovation is there and is actually supported. Additionally, of course, we celebrate all of the various cultural holidays and initiatives that are happening. And I did see a comment in the chat that talked about our Latinx community kind of being left out of the DEI conversation. And I want you all to know that that is definitely not the case at Google. September 15th through October 15th started our Latinx and our Latinx Heritage Month and our Hispanic Heritage Month. And we, along with our OLA employee resource group, are doing a number of celebrations, albeit them virtual, but a number of celebrations to celebrate the rich culture and heritage. So I will tell you, we do a fantastic job of creating community within Google. And we start by measuring how people feel from the various intersectional groups, and that gives us an opportunity to ensure that we provide the best opportunity and the best programs to support those groups.
Yeah, I agree with you, Sharika. I saw that comment as well. And I would say we address that two ways. You know, we definitely have a focus on Latinx community in a lot of the program that we do, but we also celebrate the intersectionality of the Latinx community. And there are Afro, Latinos, Latinas, and we had made a focus on this time for the 100 Days of Action of trying to root out anti-Blackness, because if you actually think about it, colorism and anti-Blackness actually cuts across all types of ethnic lines where you see darker skinned folks getting less and all of that kind of thing. So I think that there is, at least here in California, there is definitely a focus on that. We are also founding sponsors of LTX Fest, which happens out here, and it happens at the end of Latinx and Hispanic Heritage Month, where we have a huge tech conference celebrating and bringing together the Latinx community. All right, I think we have time for one more question, and I saw it kind of pop up again. So I do want to kind of get back to, how do you handle resistance to DEI efforts? Because I think that that's important. Sometimes if it seems political or like a touchy subject, some companies don't want to go near it. So how would you speak to or advise people to handle any kind of pushback or resistance to kind of creating DEI efforts?
All right, I'm happy to jump in here.
Yeah, let's do it.
I would make 2 points around this. One is the more you can get leadership commitment and vocal support, that creates permission and coverage to be able to have more open conversations and to be able to design specific initiatives to be able to address the challenges that DEI is trying to address. That'd be number one. Number two would be data. The more you can actually tell the story with data, especially for those of us that are in the tech space, you know, if you can highlight those differences, whether it's going to be on the Google Geist survey, or within Workday, we have a best Workday survey, we call it. You know, there are a number of different ways to measure, and there are a lot of different indicators that you can point to that can really highlight the importance. And for some people, like, they still need to be convinced of the business case, and then it's just a matter of time, dollars to like attrition or hiring, or, you know, anytime you have to correct problems in the product. There are a number of examples to do that, but I think to get the right cover, you need leadership support, and then to convince the naysayers, the data will help address that.
Sharika, Jimin, anything to add?
The only thing I would add is, once you provide the data and you kind of get leadership support and you give people the opportunity to come on the learning journey with you and the company, at some point you got to be willing to just go full steam ahead, even if you don't have everyone on board. So I just wanted to make the point that you give people the space to become aware, to learn, to become familiar with the terminology and the strategies that the company's doing, but you can't necessarily persuade everyone, just because I think quite honestly, the political environment that we live in currently, you know, when people hear diversity and inclusion, they automatically, some people think of it as a political talking point or try to equate it to something that it's not. And I think that is where, for those individuals, you sometimes have to progress forward. But you give them the space, and you bring them along initially, but you have to be willing, I think, to put kind of put the rubber to the road, just like you would do with a technology advancement in one of our companies or a rollout of a new product.
I love that. Sharika, anything to add?
I think Akiva and Jimin really hit on some key points. I think the leadership accountability and buy-in is key. And I think the only other thing I would add is really about how you intertwine DEI with not only your people processes, but also your products. And so when I talk about people processes, I think about our performance management system and what type of accountability measures are included there in order to increase representation or to ensure that leadership mirrors our workforce, or those types of metrics. And so when you talk about moving the needle forward, it is really centered on data. And if it's not the workforce representation data that you use, then go back to what Jimin said earlier, which is really around the P&L, right? Let's look at the balance sheet. Let's think about how the diverse teams can actually improve our profit margins and increase our revenues. And so I think you have to really create the business case. And then the final point I would add is really around helping leaders tell their own personal stories. So I think a lot of times that you get resistance because people really don't understand, or they can't make a true personal connection, especially if they identify as the majority. But there are ways that we can coach our leaders to tell their own personal story and draw out an internal commitment that translates in a way that's authentic and genuine. And once you help them build that story together, then they can use that to build momentum in the organization to drive towards your DEI goals.
So thanks. So to recap, it sounds like, definitely building a coalition using data to tell that story, intertwining DEI initiatives with products and people processes, I think are really all good tips that we can take away. I have a really good question that I want to get to, and then we're going to quickly move to close. So can you tell me, and I'm going to push you guys to do it in 1 to 2 sentences, how diversity inclusion efforts are affected given COVID-19? And I think it's just such a timely question, even though we're running out of time. So let's do a quick fire. And what are you guys seeing and how are things changing? Who wants to kick us off? Jimin?
It makes it harder to personally connect with individuals. So some of the conversations that we've talked about that are happening at our company, it's easier to do that here in person. You know, doing it via Zoom call or a phone call, it just makes it tougher. And I think that personal connection is an important part of being able to talk about this topic, being able to get people comfortable with talking about the topic.
Akiva, what would you add?
Yeah, I'd say that it's a bit of a double-edged sword. So on the positive side, and now that everybody is dialing in to a video call, it doesn't actually matter where you're located. And so there's a bit of an equalization that happens. On the flip side, it also highlights other types of differences. So, you know, people that are parents or that have, you know, other caregiving responsibilities during this time can be especially hard. And it's a good reminder that we need to kind of broaden our view of inclusivity in this work.
Awesome.
And the final thing thank you. I think the final thing that I'll add is really around this heightened awareness for the need to connect to our colleagues in a way that we took for granted before. It is also leveling the playing field for those who used to work remotely all the time versus those who had the benefit of being in home office or headquarters. And so it has actually changed our business practices and how we conduct our meetings and giving us an opportunity to be much more thoughtful about listening in for those voices that may not be as pronounced as others. So there's an inclusion piece that we appreciate.
Yeah, and I would say we are seeing, in particular from a research side, people are being more open to judging people on their skill set and not just being located in the Bay Area for a lot of the tech central companies, you know, not just looking at certain schools who has the talent and who can get it done, and us starting to live the meritocracy that we talked about. But I do think it does highlight, now we're peering into people's homes and everybody doesn't have the same kind of internet, and it's highlighting different types of divides. All right, so let's move to a close. So in closing, I would really like to know from each of you, what is it important for students to know or to do in order to push DEI forward, in particular at this moment in history? Sharika, why don't you kick us off?
I think the key word that I'll leave the group with is authenticity. Each of you are in classes, in groups, you have group projects, you're building relationships with employers. And I think the most important thing that you can do to move DEI forward is to be your authentic self and to share your lived experiences, because it's in that sharing that people are really able to connect on a different level and understand more clearly what you need to be successful. And in that authenticity, you're also able to identify within yourself what you need to be successful. And I think if you can really clearly articulate those things, then you will more likely than not find an employer or an industry that suits you and that you'll have a long and successful career in.
Awesome. Jimin, what do you have to add?
I would say be active, you know, be in the arena and really kind of helping them move this journey or this evolution along. So if you are someone that hold a place of privilege in your environment, be an active bystander, right? You know, be willing to put your privilege on the line to help give the, you know, if it's in a meeting and someone gets over talk, give them the mic back, or be willing to point out someone who deserves an opportunity before someone else just because they may be marginalized in that community. So be willing to be an active bystander. That's something all of us can do in our lives, and you don't necessarily need to have the role as D&I leader for a company or have an official position. And I think if you take that mindset in your career, you know, opportunities will present themselves, and you would help kind of affect change in your own community.
Thank you. Akiva, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I love what both Shurka and Jimin said. I would add that I think you have power as each individual. You have a power to help move this forward. And so whether you are, if you're looking for a job, think about diversity and inclusion as part of your job search. Like what type of environment do you want to be in? Ask questions during the interviews about this specifically. If you are already in the workplace and you're looking for a change, or you're looking for a voice, like you can ask questions, you can push, be ready to jump in and come in with solutions as well. But every individual, doesn't matter where you are, can help play a critical role in moving this work forward.
Yeah, I think that that's so important. And I would say the word I would think about is innovation. I think things that we thought were big bets just a few years ago, like self-driving cars and voice ordering, are now could be key solutions to what's happening with COVID-19. So I would be continuing to ask the question, what is a problem that needs to be solved? And how can you use the skill set that you have today or the resources you have today to contribute to that solution? All right, I think that's a good place to close. Thank you guys all for your time.